Long ago, in a world without electricity, fridges or supermarkets, people still found ways to keep their food from going bad. Because if it spoiled, there was no second chance. Not for the family who stored it, and certainly not for the ones who'd get the leftovers. In those days, food didn't always go to waste. Sometimes it just went to the lesser. One of their most trusted tools was salt. Coarse, powerful, and expensive. It was used to pull the moisture out of meat and fish, drying them from the inside out. Sometimes they soaked food in brine, salty water, for days before storing it in barrels. But not everyone could afford fresh salt. In poorer homes, they reused whatever they had, even leftover bathwater, which they believed still held enough salt to preserve. It didn't. But when salt was gold, even illusions had value. And in some villages, the same barrel used to salt meat might have also been used for washing clothes. Cleanliness wasn't always a priority, just survival. Smokehouses were slow ovens of preservation. Fires were kept burning for days, and meat was hung to soak up the smoke. It added flavour and protection. But smokehouses were rarely spotless. Soot, insects, and mould could creep in if fires burned too low or meat hung too long. Sometimes dogs wandered in, or rats. Still, if the meat looked dry and smelled right, it was considered safe enough. The rest could be sold or given away. Have you heard of any strange food preservation methods from history? Let us know in the comments. We might feature some in a future video. Cabbage turned sour. Cucumbers turned sharp. Through salt, water, and time, fermentation transformed vegetables into foods that could last the winter. But fermentation was a delicate thing. If barrels weren't cleaned properly, or if too much dirt got in, the wrong kind of bacteria would grow. Some people added herbs and garlic for flavour, but also to mask the smell of spoilage. And when food did go bad, the poorest still ate it. They were told it would build toughness. Often, it just built disease. In wealthier homes, fermentation jars were sealed with wax and checked often. In poorer homes, they were left on dirt floors, beside animals and chamber pots. In the warmth of summer, food was dried in the open air. Fruits, herbs, grains, even strips of meat. But dust settled on everything. So did flies. There were no screens, no soap. People waved pests away with branches and hoped for the best. Children were sometimes tasked with guarding the drying racks from birds, mice, and cats. In some towns, ovens were left warm after baking bread, and villagers brought trays of fruit to dry in the leftover heat. Cleaner, safer, but not always available to all. And if meat was dropped on the ground while drying, they'd brush off the dirt, maybe rinse it in salty water, and hang it right back up. Below their homes, they dug cellars, damp, cold, and dark. There, vegetables were buried in straw or sand. Jars sealed with wax lined the shelves. In winter, blocks of river ice were dragged and buried in thick-walled ice houses. But rats came, and so did mould. Some storage rooms were well kept. Others were full of droppings, mildew, and decay. Still, families rationed carefully. The food had to last, clean or not. In some cases, vegetables were stored alongside coal or lime to keep them cold, even though the fumes made people sick. But if it kept the food from spoiling, it was worth the risk. They sealed fruits in honey, meat in fat, cheese in wax. These natural barriers kept air and bugs out, if handled properly. But without true sterilisation, even these could fail. Meat left too long in fat turned sour. Fruit in honey moulded in damp jars. And yes, some jars were reused without washing because water had to be fetched by hand and was often contaminated. But as long as it didn't smell too bad, many still ate it. And what they wouldn't eat, they sold cheap, or handed to the poor. They didn't know about bacteria, they didn't understand sterilisation, but they experimented, observed, and survived. Some methods were brilliant, others dangerous. Still, they found ways to preserve food for months, sometimes even years. And in the quiet corners of cellars and kitchens, the old ways endured, for better or worse. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more fascinating glimpses into how people lived and survived throughout history.